All right. Judith McCombs was born in Alexandria, Virginia, and a lot has happened since then. She is the daughter of a geodetic surveyor. I believe that's a person who visits and assesses, measures, and surveys the countryside in remote places. So she saw a great deal of the United States, and came to acquire a very deep love of nature and awareness of it. And she's been a hiker and a camper most of her life. She was she was a teacher at Wayne State University at a time when I was there. We've known each other since the 1960s. And I can remember, in the English department she taught, and I can remember visiting her home on Warren Avenue when she invited Margaret Atwood, and the three of us had a wonderful conversation. Judith wrote the first biography of Margaret Atwood, and there have been many, many things written on her since then. So they had a special relationship, and I experienced firsthand the sharpness and wit of Margaret Atwood's intellect. Judith published poetry in many magazines, and she was the co-founder and editor of the magazine Moving Out, which was one of the earliest feminist literary magazines. In the 1970s, yes, I believe in the 1970s, she taught at College for Creative Studies, and then she and her husband Ernie moved to Washington, D.C., where he had a high-level position at the American Association of University Professors. And Judith has been a mainstay in the poetry scene in Washington, D.C. Since then. She has published several books. Some of the titles are Territories Here and Elsewhere, Sisters and Other Selves, and the most recent book, which I'm embarrassed to say I don't have in front of me, so I can't say the title. Judith, help us out.
The Habit of Fire.
Yeah, The Habit of Fire.
Poems selected and new.
As new and selected poems, and that was very well received, and she's been an active writer and reader at poetry readings since then. There may be some organizational things that I've overlooked in more recent years, but I believe you get an idea of what her work is. Please welcome Judith McCombs.
Thank you for that very thorough introduction. I have to say that Margaret Atwood, I wasn't a biographer of her. I did write, there's been two biographies since then, and they were both by Canadians. But what I did was write a book about Canadian poetry, but it featured her. I gathered together stuff that featured her, and that was an important book, especially in the States. It was needed. And I also I was the first person to bring her into the States, and I think I probably wrote the first criticism on her. There's a very important New York writer who wrote about the same time, and Marge Piercy also wrote about her, a Detroiter. also wrote about her work. Those were the three original ones. I do remember that the first time I brought her in, there were 28 people who came, and that's because a friend of hers brought her whole class with her. That was all. The second time she came, now I can't remember what I did the second time, but I know the third time I brought her in, it took 3 different institutions, my own and the Detroit Public Library, and a big gathering at the major university, in shoot. I should have brought the book down with me. I'm sorry. My mind is, I have a one-track mind, and it's hard for me to go from one focal thing to another. But anyway, I should shut up and start doing the poetry. But I did make a difference on the book that I did. It was needed at the time. And okay, this one is called The Observers. It really happened. The glacier disappoints you. It resembles, you observe through binoculars, not snow, but rather soiled underwear. How right you are. I agree. Strange how your underwear, discarded, I later observed, does not resemble a glacier at all. And the next one that I'm going to do is one of two poems that got accepted into Poetry Magazine. And I wrote them and sent them out when I was living in Farmington, Michigan, but still doing the teaching. The Habit of Fire. In the wilderness lake, by the wilderness lake, I settle my haunches in a nest of stones, lean back on a deadfall carcass of pine. The only shelter, cold but not wet. Behind me, thickets waiting for nightfall. No openings my size. No one's been here. The sun slides down over the green-black cones of the mountains rimming the lake. The sky flares up like a mirror, pearl on the water, glaring and graying. Suddenly thinned, air like water, rays of cold swimming towards me, too late to wash up. Gray firestones and kindling ready before me, unlit. Deadfall enough for hours. Black mountains, black sky, stone shapes changing. I see through a face net. My personal aura of insects close in, signaled by warmth. Things crackling and listening behind me. The sky goes, ooey, ooey. No one I know. Smell of horses from somewhere, then gone. No horses out here. Anything that big is probably bare. New prints today on the logging road, in the place where I backtracked for water. Bear crossing, over the prints of my vibrant souls, full grown. While I yawn, the road I will follow leans downhill, gullies, let's go. Stones topple. Thickets I broke are healing behind me. I don't want to know how the blackness spreads under my ribs. If I died out here, it would be my doing, not theirs. I smell of textiles and fire. Even dead, they'd avoid me. I couldn't live here. In the blackness, a lapping of water or muzzle. The air says something, gibberish or warning, and quits when I move, matches in hand, to strike open the fire that stops me from seeing. And this one also was in poetry. It's called In Praise of the Natural Flowing. Out of the storm pipe, between the old path and the unsold lots, the water journeys at will this winter, flowing I'm sorry, flowing and floating over its sheathing of ice. I see the clear riffles angling and falling seaward, the continents forming and formed, where ice, mud, weed stuff, and human discards run aground. The channels and shallows forced between continents, the reed clumps hummocked and footed like trees with silt and debris, and down through the water, a fragile mud tissue holding, half shielding the, I'm sorry, the dead mingled leaves and the fragments of weeds like wings stuck in amber, the reed stalks prone, combed out like the hairs of a long drowned beast, and the powdery silt and the clear openings in silt where the water has winnowed its earth. I see beside the water the gradual shelvings of ice, contoured like land, reaching out from its shorings and ending. And over the still places, the frail film ice, transparent as cirrus, or the membranes which form over the unborn. I see in this world the natural flowing, older than Genesis, slower than clouds, but faster than stone, which forms the rivers, the lowlands and channels and continents of earth, which feeds on life and tends ever towards life. And I praise it in gratitude and bitterness, knowing this flow, vulnerable and beautiful, is permitted to be this winter, between the worn path and the scrawny stakes with the flapping red plastic which claim this world. Okay. This goes back to the survey things. By the way, my father was a mathematician. He did the mathematics for a government party. They were after World War II, they were resurveying the earth. It shifts, you know, the plates shift. If there's erosion, things happen. So you need to redo it. Okay, this is called Accident, 1946. Like erosion, memory selects the shards that turn up. The trooper, leaning one boot on the shiny chrome ball of our car's trailer hitch, squints and says, "Buster, do you know how lucky you are? This little Ford would have flipped right over, kiddies and all, if you'd had safety chains when that house trailer broke loose. But the law is the law in Kentucky. I have to write you a ticket, see?" "Nah," says the second trooper. "Chains would have held. You wouldn't have lost her at all." Then my father, who is still the tallest man there, who surveys and maps the whole country, just stands there, hands hanging, like a kid lined up for recess, first day at a new school. Was it a joke or for real? When someone said he ought to get fired for breaking the law, I remember it was safer not asking. Fired was real fire. Then afterwards, there was only my family, my mother driving, though it wasn't her turn, and my father beat red down his neck as we followed the truck that was towing our tilted home with its bashed-in end, how it whipped back and forth, crossing the center line, and the doll clothes that were caught in the hole under my bed flapped and spilled out on the highway, going past like a movie. We watched without talking. Scraps, outfits, even the pink Sunday dress where I'd sewed a sleeve shut for my one-armed doll. The next one is a bear story. It really happened, but not to me. I read about it, and this is pretty true to what actually I'd learned had happened. Afterwards, you learn. Afterwards, You learned to say you were lucky. The last yeared cub stayed safely behind her, breaking the thickets for berries. Lucky the wind from the darkening valley turned cold, and your jacket was heavy and zipped to the neck. Lucky you knew, too late for retreat in that clearing of downfallen stone, to drop and go fetal, arm over neck, playing dead. Lucky the backpack came off like an arm, saving most of your arm, and kept her busy till the grunting cubs called her back to their feast. Afterwards, you learned to say that the fault was yours. You were tired, you were stubborn, making up for lost time on that summer growth trail through clearings and thickets, the wind in your face, not bothering to sing out or warn what was there beside you, not waiting for warnings to reach you. But sometimes in sleep, you go back to that stonefall clearing, that edge of safety where your scalp hair rises like hackles for no reason you see, and there is still enough time to go back as that dark shape lifts upright from its tangle of shadow, like a man in a burly fur suit peering out, and you wake with the ghost hairs rising like fur on your unscarred neck and perfect right arm. And I'll finish with a quieter one, which ends the book actually. And we did start hearing owls about half an hour ago on the other side of the ravine, probably great horns. Okay, there's a little thing below the title, which says owls courting autumn, mate in winter. In the slowing year, in the slowly turning night, we wake to stars and the deep blurred calls of the great horned owl in our neighbor's pines. Unseen, her 8 quick pulsing beats enfold his childless widowed sleep. Out back, in the pool of sky where a D-moon rides, old cuddle bones of cloud dissolve. We move in shade past hidden lives. Will the owl in her tree-crowned depths accept our slow unknowing steps? At the world's deep pole, the grounding ice lets go. The seafloor's unseen depths float free. The great ice sheet reverts to flow, F-L-O-E, and flowing seas. The teeming ice-fed life retreats, pushed back by warmer lives. Father, who mapped the planet's crust and drift, you have gone back into the earth. Mother, who gathered us when earth's faults slipped, you have gone back, and yet are here in drifts of cloud and flowing earth. Night pours towards the continent's western rim as these stars fade. The child we woke to see the D-moon spell his name will wake his child where fault lines slip slowly under younger slopes. Somewhere beyond our sight, the great owl calls, and her soft membrane resonance is echoed by a male's quick calls. 5 beats across the dark ravine where builders left a fringe of trees. Well, that all happened.
So Judith, would you like to tell us